Hey guys, my name is Haley and today I'm going to be filming a video that I never film. I feel like I don't think I've ever filmed this on BookTube because I'm not normally the one that keeps track of new releases ever. But there are actually, I started making a list the other day and there are actually several books coming out this year that I am actively excited about or at least vaguely interested in. So I was like, why not film the video? Even though I'm not normally a new releases person, I tend to read a lot of backlog books. But let's just get on into it. These are my most anticipated releases for 2021. The first of those being Sylvain Neuvel's new book, which is called The History of What Comes Next. He is the author of the Themis Files series that me and Kate buddy read several years ago at this point, and is honestly in my brain still one of my favorite series of all time. So when we both realized he was coming out with a new book, we were like, sold. Like, I will read anything he writes. I've also read his one little standalone novella thing called The Test, which I also loved, so I'm very excited for this. I literally do not have a single clue what it's about. Sylvain Neuvel writes sci-fi, so I'm like assuming it's a sci-fi of some sort, and it comes out February 2nd. Next up is a random book that I just I saw the cover when I was looking up new releases on Goodreads, and I was like, that looks cool, and then I read the description and it's about a flu virus that kind of creates an apocalyptic situation in New England. And as someone who has traveled to New England a couple times in the last few years, because that's where Kate lives, I was like, okay, I'll give that a try, and then realized that I recognized the author's name, and that is David Arnold, who, if you've been on BookTube, he wrote that book Mosquitoland that was like big a while ago, which like it wasn't my favorite thing. I've also read other books by him that have not at all been my favorite thing, but because this premise sounded so interesting, I decided I'm gonna give this one a try, but my expectations are very low. And it comes out on February 9th. Also coming out on February 9th is a new Neal Shusterman. Do I know a single thing about this? No. Do I really like the cover? Yes. Am I only reading it because it's Neal Shusterman? Also yes. He is the author of the Arc of the Scythe trilogy that I loved and was on my favorite books of the year. He wrote the Unwound Dystology, which I'm currently working my way through, and I've read several of his standalones over the years. I've been reading him since I was young, like a teenager. So, new Neal Shusterman, that was all I had to hear. And then next up is arguably my most anticipated book of the year, and that's simply because I adore this series so much, and I'm currently debating whether or not I want to reread the series before this comes out, and that is The Masked Folly by Samantha Shannon. The Bone Season, one of my favorite ongoing series, probably my favorite ongoing series at this point. I fell in love with those books in 2019. Unfortunately, when I was not on BookTube, or I would have gushed and talked about it a lot more, but it was on my favorites of like the past year when I recounted it when I came back to BookTube in 2020. But it's so good. I've never been so on board with a ship of main characters in my entire life as I am with Paige and Warden. So I can't wait for more of this world. I love Samantha Shannon's writing, and I've been asking for this since I finished The Song Rising. And according to Goodreads, that comes out on February 11th, which is not that long from now. Next up is another author that I fell in love with last year, and that is John Marrs, and this is his new book called The Minders, which is out in the UK and in other countries, but it is not out in the US. So, is there a possibility I could order this off Book Depository and get it before it comes out on February 16th? Yes, absolutely. Have I decided if I'm going to do that? No, I have not, but it's also still a very, very strong possibility depending on when I get in the mood to order something from Book Depository, because it's not my favorite medium of places to order books because they take forever to come in. So it's very possible I could order on Book Depository right now and it would come in like when it comes out in the US. So I am always and will forever be excited for new John Marrs. I did that recommendation video for John Marrs. One of his books was on my favorite books of the year list, and I want to own all of his books. I have yet to buy them because they're weirdly hard to find for like any sort of bargain price. They're always full price everywhere. So I will one day own all of the John Marrs. And honestly, I don't know very much about this besides I think it's like superhero-y. But all of his books sort of have a sci-fi twist, or they're very contemporary. But the reason I love his books is because they're the best paced thrillers I have ever read in my entire life. So, new John Marrs. And as I was making this list, I realized literally all of my anticipated releases come out in February. And then like basically nothing. And then there's like 2 in September, I think. And the only one of those that does not fall into that category is Rory Power's new book, which doesn't even have a cover. And it's just called The World Ends Here. And it's slated to come out at some point in July, which I read Rory Power's debut and thought it was fine. I thought it was like a solid book. I liked her writing. And then I read Burn Our Bodies Down. Burn Our Bodies Down over the summer, which I really liked because it had a lot of biblical allusions, and I think I was the only human on the planet that recognized all of the biblical allusions, and I always intended to make a video about that, and I never did, so I might have to reread it and annotate just to make that video because that book was so interesting. It 100% made me much more interested in Rory Power as an author, so I will be keeping an eye on all of her new releases, and this is the one that is currently slated to come out. Second to last is a book that has been on my anticipated things for a million years since it was announced, I think 2 years ago, and that is Jay Kristoff's new book, which is called Empire the Vampire. I just heard Jay Kristoff and like Vampire Story, and I'm like kind of on board with the whole vampires are coming back thing in publishing. So I know next to nothing about this besides Jay Kristoff and Vampire, and spoiler for like my intentions and goals for this year, but I plan to reread the first two Nevernight books because it's been 3 years since I read them, and I always said that was my favorite series, like, of the time. And by the time Dark Dawn came out, I did not remember enough details, and I refused to read it until I reread the series. And then I just didn't read fantasy last year, like barely at all, and I didn't want that to like color my opinion of the series. So that is on my list to reread this year. And not that this book has anything to do with that series, it's just all by the same author. But I do want to get into Jay Kristoff again because I do love him as an author, and I want to know if that is still the case and if I love that series as much as I did in the past. And then last but not least, this is purely also an author thing in which I fell in love with one of his books, and I now kind of want to read all of them, and he has a bunch of random ones out, and that is TJ Klune's new book. This is the author of The House in the Cerulean Sea, which, if you watched my favorite books of the year, was very high on my list. He also has a bunch of like older books that are kind of hard to find. I've been watching them on Thrift Books for a while, so I do plan to read more of his books. One of them in mind is called Wolfsong. I know that's like a trilogy or a series or something. I plan on checking that out. But he has a new book coming out in September. I forgot to say Empire the Vampire is currently slated for September 7th, but it's been pushed back so many times in the last 2 years that I'm not sure how much I trust that. But for Under the Whispering Door, it comes out on September 21st, and the cover is beautiful, like TJ Klune's other book that I loved. So I'm very excited to read more of his writing, and I am definitely going to be anticipating more things that he comes out with in the future. But yeah, those are all of my anticipated releases as of right now. Basically just February and September are the only months that I care about when it comes to brand new releases, apparently. But please let me know if there's any books that you were looking forward to that are being released this year. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.